Hi, Christy.
Hey, Christy. Oops, can't hear you. Just thought I'd say hi. And everybody else. Just on the list.
All right, good morning, everybody. It's Jane Bland, and welcome to Zoom. It just turned 9 o'clock, and I think we'll give a couple of minutes for people who are still joining, and then we'll start with our meeting. All right, go ahead and get started. Uh, Welcome to the January meeting of the Judicial Commission on Mental Health. It's good that we have one over Zoom every year so that we can uh, have people participate without having to make all the travel plans necessary to get to Austin. But I miss seeing everyone in person. So welcome over the video. We're glad to have you. I can't believe that it's already the last day of January 2025 is flying by. And part of that is we have some news from our court. As you all know, at the end of the year, Chief Justice Heck retired after 38 years of service to our court and even longer to the Texas state judiciary. At the time of his retirement, he was the longest serving state court judge in active service. And so I haven't asked him. I need to find out who now is taking over that title. So I don't think it's anyone on our court, but there's somebody in Texas that has that title, and I'm going to find out who it is. And so at the turn of the new year, our court welcomed a new justice, Justice James Sullivan, who comes to us from the governor's office, having been legal counsel to the governor. In addition, the governor also named our new Chief Justice, Jimmy Blacklock. And Jimmy is not new to our court. He served on our court for the last 6 years and has 7 years, I think, and has really stepped up to that role and has already met with Christy about JCMH and what the JCMH does. and I think has indicated that Justice Huddle and I will continue in our role as chairs and liaisons from the Texas Supreme Court to the JCMH. And then in other news that's more relevant to this group, we are so delighted that Judge Jesse McClure has been named by the Court of Criminal Appeals as its chair and liaison to the JCMH, and has further appointed Judge Mary Lou Keel as deputy. Replacing Judge McClure. And many of you know Judge McClure. He's been very active in his role as deputy liaison and been at all of our summits and knows many of you well. Has a really wonderful background to help us govern this organization and help it to do good things going into the future. So we're very delighted to have Judge McClure, and we are equally delighted to have Judge Keel, who, though new to the JCMH, is not new at all to the state judiciary and has served as a trial court judge for many years. She and I had the pleasure of serving together as district court judges in Harris County. And now she's had a lengthy term of service on the Court of Criminal Appeals. And so we welcome someone with the breadth of experience that she has, and also just sort of always willing to lend a helping hand. So welcome, Judge Keel. We're obviously going to miss Judge Hervey, who also retired after many years of service to the courts and in particular to this organization. And we'll miss her, but we've got good people in Judge McClure and Judge Keel. And I wondered, Judge Keel, if you wanted to say a couple of words just to introduce yourself to this group. Many of you may already know her in other capacities, but we're so glad that you're here with us today.
Well, thank you, Justice Bland. That's very kind of you. I hope I can live up to your introduction of me, which was more effusive than I would have expected. But it's an honor to be serving on the commission, and I do hope that I can help it achieve its aims. I will have to learn a lot about it because I have not served on it before, but I know that it is important. Its work is very important, and I look forward to getting to know more about it and getting to know all of you, and just hope I can help out. So thank you, and back to you, Justice Bland.
You're welcome. We're glad to have you. And so just to give you a brief overview of our meeting today, which I don't expect will go the whole 3 hours, but we've blocked out that time just in case. We're going to have obviously presentations from Vice Chair Justice Bill Boyce, who's going to talk about what's happening over at the legislature, which is always interesting, and from our jurists in residence and Professor Shannon, who's also going to add his expertise and knowledge to our legislative update. In addition, we're going to have presentations from Dr. Melissa Eshelman, who's a professor at Dell Medical School and a former JCMH commissioner, and then Dr. Ivante.
Jane, you're on mute.
Oh, thank you. I'm glad someone told me. So just not to repeat myself, but we're going to have a great meeting today. I don't expect it to go the whole 3 hours, although I just extended it by about 20 seconds from my ineptitude, so I apologize. We're going to have a great meeting. We're going to have presentations from Justice Bill Boyce about our legislative work, and Professor Shannon, who's going to add his knowledge and expertise to that. We'll hear from our jurists in residence, and we'll also get a presentation from Dr. Melissa Eshelman, who was a former JCMH commissioner and a professor at Dell Medical School, and from Ivante Collins, who's the vice president of intellectual and developmental disabilities for the Harris Center. And they're going to give updates on the work that they're doing with the hope that you all can take that and implement it in your neck of the woods. And so at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Justice Rebecca Huddle, my colleague and partner in this organization, and she's going to have a few words of welcome.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Is my audio okay? Justice Flynn, we could hear you just fine, and then there was only a small blip where we couldn't hear you. Okay, I'm getting some nods. Good morning, everyone. I'm Rebecca Huddle. I am happy to continue on this year as the Deputy Liaison to the Commission, working happily with Justice Bland, who's our chair. I also have the privilege of being the deputy chair to the Children's Commission. So I feel very privileged to have a role and insight into both of these commissions, which oftentimes are doing work that ultimately has the same mission to improve lives for Texans. Um, so I want to talk about two things. First of all, a little information about what's in the meeting notebook that we're going to be using in today's meeting. And secondly, a little about some commissioners, some thank yous as we've had some retirements and also some welcomes. So let's get to that. Turning first to the agenda. So you should have gotten this by email. If it's easier for you, I think that it's being dropped in the chat if that's a better place to access it. But especially for folks who are joining us for the first time, we make these notebooks available to you a few days in advance of the meeting so you have some sense of what the meeting will entail. Today, we have our agenda behind tab 1. Behind tab 2, we have a list of who everyone is. So you should find there a list of the commissioners, the executive committee, the members of the collaborative council, which is a separate body that does a lot of the sort of day-to-day and week-to-week inputs, and commissioners. So that is sort of a who's who. In case you should need to reach out to any of them, which is one of the functions and really important parts of this commission is having access to all these other people with really deep expertise. Okay, tab 3 in the agenda is the meeting minutes from the last meeting. Michael Garcia endeavors to capture the announcements made, and we want those to be useful in the future. So if you have any additions, please reach out to him and we'll get the meeting minutes updated and complete. Tab 4 is the budget. The typical way that this works is that we have an in-depth report on the budget at our April meeting. So we can look forward to that, but that's not something we will do a deep dive on today. Tab 5 contains the end of the year report. And so that's a good place to look to get an understanding of progress, last year's progress on commission projects and committees. It also includes, importantly, and something we will talk about and hear about today, is the JCMH legislative proposals and the 2024 summit report. Okay, so toward the end of today's meeting, we have some time available for announcements, but I will emphasize that it is limited time. And so if you have an announcement, we can handle that in a couple of different ways. You can, when the time comes, raise your virtual hand if you know how to do that on your Zoom buttons. Or you can drop an announcement in the chat, and Christy will call on you and give you just a little bit of time to expand on whatever you drop into the chat. Okay, second item I wanted to address in opening has to do with people, sort of our what makes this place so special. We have some folks I want to recognize, commissioners who retired from the commission at the end of 2024, and there are 3 of them. First is Dr. Andy Keller, the CEO of the Meadows Mental Health Policy Institute, deeply experienced psychologist, more than 2 decades in behavioral health policy. He was near and dear to Justice Bland and my heart, an inaugural member, commissioner of the JCMH, who testified at the joint hearing that established the commission in 2018. So he's spoken at annual summits. He's been a leader in the field, and we will miss him deeply. He has already named his successor from MMHPI, Yolanda Lewis, who I'll say more about in just a minute. Yolanda is the Vice President for Justice and Health and the Executive Director at the Center for Justice and Health. Second, in terms of outgoing commissioners, retiring commissioners, Andrea Richardson, who was the CEO of Bluebonnet Trails for 16 years. So under her leadership, Bluebonnet Trails, they had just a lot of innovation over the course of the years in delivering mental health services, competency restoration, you name it. So Ms. Richardson was a member of the Summit Curriculum Committee and a contributing author on our really important bench book. And so we express gratitude for her service and wish her well. And finally, thirdly, Julie Wyman was the Director of Mental Health and Behavioral Health for the TEA, or Texas Education Agency, and spent 16 years there. She dedicated her 40-plus year career to working with at-risk youth, prevention of high school dropout, supporting student mental health on campus, and many more admirable goals. Ms. Wayman was a contributing author to the bench book as well, and a great resource on youth mental health matters. So thanks to each of those three contributors for all that they have done over the years to advance the JCMH's work. So I wanted to congratulate them on their retirement and also just acknowledge their important contributions. Thank you. And then in terms of a welcome, I'd like to officially welcome Yolanda Lewis as a commissioner. As I said a second ago, Ms. Lewis is the Executive Vice President for Justice and Health and the Executive Director of the Center for Justice and Health at the Meadows Mental Health Policy Institute. Ms. Lewis has a wealth of experience in court administration. She holds a master's degree in public administration from the University of South Alabama. She was a collaborative council member for many years, and she is replacing Dr. Andy Keller as our commissioner from Meadows. So please join me. She's with us here today. I can see her big smile in my little Zoom box. So let's welcome Ms. Lewis. Join me in giving her a warm welcome today. Welcome, Yolanda. We're glad to have you in this new, you're not new, but you're new in this role. And so welcome aboard. With that, thanks for your attention. I'll turn it over to Christy Taylor.
Thank you, Justice Tuttle and Justice Bland. So I have another welcome. Jason Bramall is the ex officio appointee from the Office of the Governor. And I don't mean to put him on the spot, but that is an appointment that changes out as the Office of the Governor sees fit. So we want to welcome him to, I believe, his first meeting and recognize him. I know this is a very busy time of year for all of us with the legislative session. So thank you for making time to be here.
Yeah, thank you. I'm excited to be here and excited to be part of the group. Very invested in what this group does and excited to get to work and get to know all of you.
Wonderful. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Okay, so my announcements are short, but I wanted to tell you about a group that I am part of. National Center for State Courts has gathered all states who have put forth the funds to create an actual position in either their Office of Court Administration or their highest court that is similar to what my position is. And so right now it looks like it's fewer than 20 states that have done this, but it has been a wealth of information. we are able to compare how the states are rolling out SIM mapping. How we had a meeting yesterday about assisted outpatient treatment courts and the way our different statutes run. And so if you ever have questions that you would like to know how other states are handling this, this has been just a great format that NCSC has developed. They brought us all together to DC so that we formed relationships and that we can reach out to one another. It also was an opportunity to find out that JCMH was the first judicial commission on mental health in the country, as far as I can tell from this group. There was another state that had a position like mine before that, but we were the first to actually create a permanent commission. And since then, we've had a few states, as you know, follow in that tradition and seek out our assistance on how they could do the same. So it has been wonderful to connect with this group and learn more about that. Another first that I have been able, I think, to ascertain from this group is our county mental health law plan. All of the states are deep into launching sequential intercept model mapping. And most of you know about the sequential intercept model. If you're unfamiliar, it is just a platform to look at our interventions in a linear way. And we take this model and go into communities and assess where the gaps are and where the opportunities are. And it gives us an opportunity to see how people with mental illness or intellectual disability are moving into the criminal justice system and where we could stop that process from happening all over again. So much of our work, our bench book, and most of the trainings that we do have some sort of reference point to the sequential intercept model. So like I said, most states are launching into SIM mapping. Most other states have, 30 to 40 counties, something like that. So it's a little bit of a different challenge in Texas. But we do seem to be the first to really look at how the legal system is functioning. So I am proud of that work. We had gone into 8 counties. I showed a video at the last commission meeting about that work, and you could talk to some of the counties that went through that process, but it is a new creation. So we have decided that we would like to follow up with those counties in the next year and see what the progress is, and make sure that we just didn't move into that county, do a workshop, and then disappear. So I think we will be on hold for starting new counties with that process until the legislative session is over, so that we can really reflect on that work and see what the tangible results are. Also, speaking of tangible results, as you all know, during the legislative session, we are very much trying to measure and look at the good that we are doing in ways that we can tell that story to the legislature and to other stakeholders. So I have a request from all of you. Maybe this needs to be a survey in the future, something more formal, but at the moment, if you have had an experience with JCMH that has led to a good outcome, if you would just drop me an email or anyone on our staff an email, sometimes even those just qualitative types of assessments are really helpful. And let me give you an example. I was just listening to the podcast that Rose does such a wonderful job with. And this latest one in January is Grayson County and some of their surrounding counties talking about their jail-based competency restoration program. And in that podcast, they say, we had a SIM map, and that was with JCMH. And in that SIM map, we sat down and looked at a list of interventions that could help our community. And one of them was a jail-based competency restoration. So they started a work group from that SIM map and then move forward to the point where they have a functioning JBCR program now, and they're seeing success with that. So far, I think they have moved everyone off the competency wait list in their jail and have had a 0 wait list. Now they are a county that, wasn't a Harris County, didn't have hundreds and hundreds of people on that list, but just still seeing that tangible progress is so important in our storytelling. So any efforts that you can share like that, where even maybe we made a connection that then opened up another door for you, all of that helps us really quantify the work that we're doing. Okay, one other thing I want to mention is we were approached by a technology company, and we do not promote vendors, you know, as, being a part of the Supreme Court. But I do think it is an interesting idea, and I wanted to make an announcement that if there is a community that thinks they might be right for this, to let me know. So this technology company may be one of a few, but they are exploring a platform where you could, like we've all dreamed of, go on to technology and check to see how many beds are currently available in each facility. And they would like to work with a county. I don't think it's a free opportunity. I think there, you know, that there would need to be an exchange, but I do think in those pilot situations, there's probably a reduced fee. They would like to work with the county to show the effectiveness of this. So if that is something that your county might be interested in, please get back with me and I would make that introduction just to make sure we're exploring all the available technology that could move our state forward. So another announcement is we have a Texas AOT Coalition that meets February 14th, April 15th, and August 15th for this next year. And that is chaired by Daniela Chisholm out of El Paso County. And then the JCMH is helping to support that group. And then lastly, we have several conferences coming up that we hope that you will take advantage of. I gave a presentation last week to the Governor's Committee on People with Disabilities. It has been wonderful connecting with them and making sure we are not reinventing the wheel and using all of those resources really efficiently. There is a Treatment Advocacy Center conference in March that we'll be speaking at, an All Rise conference in May, May 27 to May 30th, where JCMH will be represented and involved, and a Correctional Management Institute conference in June 8th through 11th that we will be speaking at. So many opportunities to connect, and we want to make sure we're amplifying the voices of our partner organizations. Okay, so next we will hear about our Legislative Research Committee from Justice Bill Boyce, Professor Shannon, and we also have Megan Lavoie, who is on with us today. All right, so Justice Boyce.
Thank you so much, Christy. Good morning to everyone. We're going to go over this fairly at a high level. We're not going to go through each of the proposals, but I do want to put the legislative activities in context. This will be the third session in which the Commission has collaborated with the Judicial Council and our representatives and senators in the legislature to identify and formulate and promote specific pieces of legislation to improve the administration of justice for persons with mental illness and IDD. This session, we have 13 proposals that were formulated by the Legislative Research Committee, spearheaded by Professor Shannon, and a lot of great collaboration in that committee to identify areas where improvements can be made legislatively, discuss them, and come up with a consensus on how to move forward. If you want to review the specifics of the 13 proposals, they're at the back of your hearing notebook. But at this juncture, I'm going to invite Professor Shannon to highlight particular points. We're at the beginning of the legislative season right now, always an interesting and fraught time. So this is a good time for an overall check-in, and I'll invite Professor Shannon at this time to give us an overview.
Thank you, Justice Boyce, and good morning, everyone. Special shout out to all our Texas Tech law grads and other Red Raiders on the call. So, but glad to have this opportunity to be with you. You'll be happy to know, as a law professor, although trained to speak in 50-minute increments, Christy said don't take more than 15, and I don't think I'll need that much. So, as Justice Boyce noted, we're early in the session. Our recommendations have gone forward. We're working closely with Megan Lavoie, who you'll hear from in a little bit, with the Judicial Council. Our concepts, our proposals are with the Legislative Drafting Committee, the Legislative Council at present. They're working on getting our drafts into proper form for filing. So that's moving apace, and I anticipate those will be posted fairly soon and filed. In addition, being early, we just had a speaker elected not long ago, and House committees are going to be, we assume, designated fairly soon. So we'll watch that and get a sense of where our bills may go in both the Senate and the House once they're filed. What I thought I'd do with our time this morning, though, is highlight a few other bills that weren't necessarily our proposals, but things that have been filed to date that might bear watching as the session goes forward. So, Rose, can you put those slides up? So, just in working with Kama and others on the staff, we identified some 40 to 50 bills that have already been filed that have some bearing on the statutes that we work with. And I'm not going to go through all of those. I've gone through and identified 11 or 12 that I think are particularly noteworthy. Now, many of those that have been filed or refiled from last session and never got a committee hearing. And so I kind of rule those out. Obviously, if there's some momentum behind any of those, we'll come back and follow those. These, though, I thought were at least of interest to this group, and I'll spend just a couple of minutes going through them. Senator Johnson has filed Senate Bill 643, which tracks one of our JCMH proposals. It will address proper venue for commitment processes. This is an issue that was brought to our attention that occurs particularly if somebody is apprehended on an emergency detention in one county and transferred to a facility in another county. The former law, or the law as it exists now, says that proper venue is where the person is found. Well, that's somewhat ambiguous. And so the text, the revision would say, hey, it could be either where the person's located at the time the application for court-ordered mental health services is filed, or where they were apprehended on the emergency detention. So to give alternative venue options. The second one, the all arrest or House Bill 1656 had some publicity when it was pre-filed in December. Representative Howard from Travis County had a bill that will, if passed, expand emergency detention authority beyond law enforcement to also include paramedics. Interesting concept, not too different from one we discussed within the Legislative Committee and ultimately determined not to go forward with this session, where we were looking at the possibility of counties that wish to opt in, where they're members of a mobile crisis outreach team might have that authority. We've parked that for now. This bill was filed. One gap that at least some of us in looking at it were concerned about that I think would have to be addressed is who's going to fund that transportation if this were to be enacted. The next bill by Hull 1583 would make a number of changes to the statutory form that law enforcement uses when they do a warrantless apprehension for emergency detention. It's very close in terms of the language used to one of our proposals as well. So it was filed independently, but something to watch. 1938 by Representative Campos would expand the emergency detention period from its current law of 48 hours, or as we know, it can be longer if a weekend intervenes, but changing that 48 to 72 hours, and also has some language revising, in particular, some of the deterioration criteria. This latter part is different from a concept we've included as part of our proposals. And somewhat similarly, Representative Guillen in HB 1239 hasn't done anything changing criteria, but that bill would change the 48 hours to 120 hours. Again, things that are worth watching. Whether 48 hours continues to be the right number is not something we've yet discussed within the JCMH or our legislative subcommittee. I don't really know then where this might go, but something to at least bear watching. We can go to the next slide, Rose. So this is the lot of them, the rest of them, and let me just highlight a few of them. The first two, Representative Frank's bill and Representative Hinojos's bill, both are from, I guess, a different direction, trying to address wait lists within the jails. The first one would require a transfer from the jail to the state hospital. If inpatient competency restoration is necessary, it would have to happen within 45 days. If it didn't, then HHSC would be required to reimburse the county for any additional jail days. Representative Hinojos's bill is similar, but it has the mark at 21 days with requirements for payments for there. So again, something different, something interesting looking at that. I doubt that, and we'll hear from HHSC later, I doubt that their budget request has included dollars necessarily to do this. 1538 by Lalani would provide physicians at facilities with the authority to exercise a 4-hour hold for voluntary patients who decide to leave, but the physician deems that they're a risk and should remain. As most of you know, there was a bill like this that passed several sessions ago that Governor Abbott vetoed. This appeared to me to be somewhat similar to that bill. Representative Jones's HB 1455 has some detailed reporting requirements for law enforcement in arrest situations of persons with mental illness who might qualify for emergency detention, to explain why they arrested and did not divert. Again, an interesting, different kind of approach. I'm sure law enforcement members of our group are tracking on that one. Similarly, with respect to law enforcement, Representative Hull's bill 2069 would require law enforcement to inform parents if a child is subject to an emergency detention, to let parents intervene if they choose to seek voluntary care. Also sets out requirements that law enforcement use trauma-informed practices. And then the last one that I had flagged, House Bill 2161 by Representative Gomez, doesn't change the law directly with respect to firearms purchases, but tracks, as I understand it, federal requirements where under federal law, a person who is within 30 days of release of state mental health court-ordered type treatment can't purchase a firearm in those 30 days. A part of this would track that and would also require reporting to DPS relating to it. And I think these last three our law enforcement members all would be particularly interested in tracking. So that is my report, and I will hand it back to you, Justice Boyce.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it, Professor Shannon. Next, we're going to hear from Megan Lavoie. Megan has multiple titles as Administrative Director for the Texas Office of Court Administration, Executive Director for the Judicial Council. I think we can wrap that up in saying that Megan is a point person for interfacing with the legislature in connection with legislation that is recommended by the Judicial Council and legislation that affects the judiciary. And so I'm going to invite her to give us an update as we begin this latest session.
Thanks, Justice Boyce, and thanks everyone for having me. And Justice Boyce and Professor Shannon did a great job going over some of the mental health bills, so y'all are making my job very easy. I have some stats that I wanted to share with you as of yesterday. So far there's been 2,112 House bills filed, 52 House concurrent resolutions, 108 House joint resolutions, and then on the Senate side, 988 Senate bills filed, 9 Senate concurrent resolutions, and 43 Senate joint resolutions, with a total of 3,312 bills filed so far this legislative session. Out of those, so y'all might not know, but the Office of Court Administration does all of the fiscal notes, so analysis of the bill, and also how much the bill is going to cost for all of the bills that impact the judiciary. And we have received so far this session 679 fiscal note requests. So a good chunk of those bills that have been filed have some impact on the judiciary. I was going to point out 2 other bills, Professor Shannon, that weren't on your list that were on my list. Senate Bill 53 by Senator Zaffarini, which is a refile of Senate Bill 64 from last session. And that bill is relating to notice and filing requirements and court proceedings involving people with mental illness. And then also House Bill 1692 by Goodwin, which would create a criminal offense for transfer of a firearm to certain people with mental illness. Also, a couple other just general OCA updates. I'm going to drop it in the chat, but there was a report that was published by the State Auditor's Office on, if y'all are not familiar with it, regarding competency restoration services for inmates in county jails. We've been receiving several requests about this report, and I will drop it in your chat, mostly related to district and county clerks reporting mental health cases to DPS, and about 40% of those that were on HHSC's competency restoration wait list were not reported to DPS to go into the NICS system. So been getting a lot of questions about that and training for the clerks. It's a good report. I'm going to drop it in the chat just in case y'all have not seen that. In addition, we have recently published 2 reports, which I will also drop in the chat. One is on our guardianship program, and then the other one is a new report. We publish our guardianship report every year. But the other one is the hidden backbone of justice, and it's a workload study that we were required to do by the legislature on the workloads of judicial staff across the state. And so it's called the hidden backbone of justice. It looks like this. It's a great report. To my knowledge, we have never done a report like this in Texas. We were required to look at the workload, who is working in the judiciary across the state, what they're making, and what their needs and additional resources are. And so it's a great report that we have been talking with the legislature about, and also are hoping that counties will be able to use this report to talk with their commissioners' courts about getting additional resources for their local judiciary. So I will drop both of those in the chat, and they are also on our website. One other update that I've talked to the commission a lot about is our text reminder program. So we signed the contract for this program in August. It was originally going to be just limited to providing text reminders in criminal cases, but we have opened it up to all case types. And we have 30 counties that are signed up to get onto the system so far. We have 2 counties that are already using it. It's Tarrant County and Hidalgo County. So we're very excited about this program. Data has shown that it's just simply getting a text reminder is one of the best ways to improve appearance rates in court. And so we're hoping to have a lot of data to report here in the years to come on that as well. And that's just my brief update. Happy to be here with y'all this morning.
All right, I guess this is where I jump in. I'm Judge Brent Carr, jurist in residence. And my information or our information is found under tab 5 on page 20, the report for the 2024 summit. We had over 1,100 attendees by in person and virtually. And I'm very proud to say, along with my co-conspirator Rose McBride, that we were able to account for every square inch of Texas. I presume that even includes that island that Texas recently annexed in the middle of the Rio Grande River. So I guess that was included also. But we had LMHAs, all the counties in some form or fashion represented, and it was a very it was a goal that we had intended to achieve, and we got it done this year. We had a lot of feedback. Boys in the Bunkhouse was rated amongst our top presentations. We also had diversion before diversion by our very own Commissioner Vicki Rice, and Judge Rocky Jones out of Dallas presented on that. Every single presentation was voted as someone's favorite. So thank you to everyone here on the commission and collaborative council who presented, and a shout out to the ones that we brought in. And in fact, Rose has put together a brief video presentation on the highlights of the summit. So Rose, I'll flip it to you and I'll be back with you in just a second.
It's a privilege to welcome you to the 7th Annual Judicial Summit on Mental Health.
Thank you so much for your attendance today. We have 400 people in person, and we have 600 people who have signed up to attend online. For the first time, we have one registrant from every one of our 254 counties in Texas.
Although our counties have so many things that divide us, we come together for this one shared goal of creating just and supportive systems for people with mental health and substance use disorders and intellectual and developmental disabilities.
I'm pleased to witness so many distinguished state and county leaders here in person and joining us virtually as we come together to tackle these critical issues.
Every year, this summit serves as a critical platform for dialogue, innovation, and action at the intersection of mental health and justice.
As we work to engage and empower courts, we collaborate for the benefit of everyone. I hope you'll use this time at the summit to meet new people and explore creative ideas.
Together, we have made significant progress, yet we know many challenges remain. So we're going to continue to do the work, and I'm so glad that we have dedicated people in this room who feel the same way.
Thank you, Rose. That was a very good recap. We had, I think we had like as many as 4 breakout sessions going on at a time, and that is also a increase over what we've done in the past. A reminder that our summit for this year is scheduled for October the 7th and 8th in Houston, Texas. The commission meeting will be on Monday, the day before the summit actually kicks off. And the last thing I would like to mention is that as Rose and I were traipsing around Texas, the answers that I got as we were ferreting out various LMHAs and counties that had not participated, well, they started with, I didn't even know we had a judicial commission on mental health, all the way through people that had knowledge of it but just hadn't used it. So what this calls me to begin thinking about, and I hope we get to talk about some more in the future. And I'm also reflecting on what Judge Roxanne Nelson had brought up before, is that about you're surprised at the few number of counties in Texas that are considered what we would call urban counties. Almost 2/3 of our counties would be considered rural counties. I don't know where to draw that line in the sand, but in serving in our lanes, we're not here to replace the work of LMHAs or other agencies, particularly from our state government that are required to work in various fields. But within our mission in enhancing the fair treatment of people in the justice system, I would like to propose some discussion on the creation of a rural issues committee. And I'm going to have to punch out here in just a second to head out to a funeral, but I'm looking for some co-conspirators, and particularly people who would like to take a leadership role. I see this as maybe 2 or 3 meetings a year. It would certainly provide a platform to focus on technology and other issues that we can use to solve distance problems. JudgeBcar@gmail.com is my direct email, judgebcar@gmail.com. You can certainly reach me through the JCMH staff, but if you have any interest in joining me on this adventure, so we can come up with a proposal to submit to the executive committee and commission, I would appreciate a little bit of help. So that's about all I have to say, and I'll turn it over to Judge John Specia for his report. Judge.
If I might interrupt, this is Beth Lawson out of Lubbock. I am one of the LMHA representatives, and I have the honor of representing a small metropolitan area, several rural counties, and a frontier county. So I would love to participate in this venture with you, Judge Carr.
All right, we're going to double your pay on the commission.
Done.
Hi, Brent, thank you very much. I'm going to take a point of personal privilege here just to recognize Justice Boyce, Professor Shannon, and Megan Boyd. They are an incredible resource to the legislature and an incredible representative of this commission. They are a wealth of knowledge. They give unbiased information to the legislature. They are just, they do incredible work. They don't sleep during the session. And by the next time we get together, the war will be over. We may be in a special, who knows? But I just wanted to say the work that's been going all year long and has gone on for many years is absolutely incredible. So I want to thank you guys in advance for your work. The summit was fabulous this year. I really enjoyed it. It's growing, it's developing. The commission was contacted by one of the counties near me that has had a SIMS mapping and is part of the mental health law plan. And SIMS mappings are wonderful, but operationalizing SIMS mappings, that's a whole nother level of things. And particularly for the suburban counties, the resources change dramatically from urban counties to one county over. And as the number of counties you get away, the resources dwindle, and transportation and housing just becomes a tremendous problem. And so I'm real excited to be working with this county, and hopefully we'll work with some more counties, particularly I don't exactly know how to define them, either rural, almost urban, whatever. And when I became commissioner of the Department of Family and Protective Service, I learned about the frontera, the frontier counties out in West Texas. So we have an extraordinary number and mixture of county governments that have jails, and they have people in them that oftentimes have mental health issues. So I'm excited to start that work. I love talking about judicial leadership, and I've talked to Christy, and Rose is such a great resource. I'm hoping to work with her on doing some webinars or short things on judicial leadership to provide something on our website that judges and other people can go to talk about how judges can be leaders in this area and can make significant impact through leadership. So I'm excited for this year. I think we're going the right direction. I think we'll all survive the session. It's always a challenge. And Megan does those fiscal notes. Now, most people are unbiased, and she is also unbiased in preparing them, but they are life or death for bills on how those fiscal notes come out. So thank you for your work, Megan, on all areas. And thank you to everyone else that will spend a lot of time in the next under 120 days working in the legislature to improve our legislation for the mental health of all Texans. Thank you. And I'm going to kick this over to Molly Davis, one of our great staff members. Molly.
Yeah, thank you very much, Judge. Molly Davis here. Good morning, everyone. I'm the Director of Operations for the JCMH. I have just a couple of juvenile justice youth-related bills that I wanted to go through here right now. They're not JCMH proposals, but I think that they're still going to be interesting to folks who work in juvenile courts or folks who work with youth. House Bill 186 has probably gotten the most attention by now. This is a bill that was filed and it purports to ban social media use by people under the age of 18 by mandating pretty strict age verifications and also placing responsibility for enforcement on the social media platforms. Any violations of that would be treated as deceptive trade practices. So I feel like that's real interesting, one we should keep an eye on. House Bill 1821 and 1822 are both related to record sealing. House Bill 1821 would require juvenile probation departments and the state bar to provide information to youth and families on record sealing procedures. And House Bill 1822 would allow for the sealing of some determinate sentence cases that are not transferred to adult criminal court. I think we've seen that bill before, not recently, but it's back again. House Bill 1831 would expand the types of offenses that are eligible for juvenile drug courts if the prosecutor agrees to it, so there's a public safety consideration there. And then finally, the last two bills on my slide are exactly the same, they're identical. Senate Bill 661 and Senate Bill 698, each would create the Office of Youth Health and Safety within the Health and Human Services Commission. We have representatives from Health and Human Services here today. I do not want to steal their thunder, so I will let them tell you about that. And then what didn't make it on the slide was that at least one raise the age bill has been filed. Again, we see these every legislative session. I do not know if that's a priority for this legislature or not. In legislative years, we do convene our bench book committee. And so I will be looking to all of you juvenile law experts to help us write the next edition of the bench book. I think we're going to convene that in late April or early May, I would guess, once we have a better picture of how the ledge is shaping up this year. And in training and technical assistance, I have some quick final numbers from 2024 for you. Last year, the JCMH staff provided education or training at 42 events, over 21 counties to over 3,000 attendees. That is completely separate from the training and education we did at the summit and also from our summer webinar series. We are able to train on a wide variety of topics, from competency restoration and the 1622 process to ethics, specialty courts, juvenile law, and also using multidisciplinary collaboration to improve court efficiency. So if you need a speaker, please come find us. We also completed 79 other requests for technical assistance, which range from professional peer networking to expert consultation to sim mapping. And those 79 requests were from 41 counties and also 5 states. We served over 400 people in that capacity. We also called on many of you judges and attorneys to help troubleshoot complex legal processes, and every one of you answered the call when we asked. So thank you for that. We have 4 sim mappings lined up for 2025, all focused on the juvenile justice system so far. We're going to start in Bell County in February, then we're going to move to Burleson County in March. We're also working with local communities to schedule mappings in Gregg County up in Longview, and then also in Kendall County, which is out west in Boerne. I still have one youth sim mapping left to award in 2025. These sim mappings are a great way to analyze how your juvenile justice system interacts with the behavioral health system, strengthen those relationships, maybe make some new partnerships, and work on some shared priorities for change. I would love for this sim mapping to go to a JCMH commissioner or to a collaborative council member to help you bring that to your community. So if that is of interest to you, please reach out to me and we can start that work. And I'll hand it over to Kama Harris. Thank you all.
Thank you so much, Molly. Hi, everyone. I'm Kama Harris. I am your Director of Policy and Education. And this past week, you should have received a post-summit email that includes links to all the recorded summit sessions. And as a reminder, you can still receive professional continuing education credit by watching these online and then filling out that CEU survey on the website. That email also included a link to the photos taken by our hired photographer. So I believe we have around 500 photos, and there's quite a few good ones of both speakers and guests. So please go in there, look around, maybe a new LinkedIn photo. We got to utilize these photos, and I hope you enjoy them. This is the first time we've let everyone access them, so it's exciting for us. Lastly, this email included this year's top learning points. And even though I'm sure that all of the attendees thoroughly read this recap document, which is also in your meeting notebook, Rose, of course, our communications manager, has created a wonderful video showcasing these top 15 learning points of the summit. So I have the privilege of letting you guys watch this.
It takes a team of people of all different expertise, but all kind of pointed in the same direction to make it work. And we have to be willing to share information with each other. We have to be willing to work with each other and know that it's not just my job, it's our job.
We really need to break things down in a way that everyone who's reading these documents can understand.
Clinical language and legal language is very different, and sometimes that in itself can be a barrier.
We're asking and encouraging you all to consider things like investing in understanding these communities, investing in rehabilitation, restorative justice measures.
In our focus groups, what we heard from the children is that there's still lots of stigma around talking about mental health and substance use concerns.
Burnout isn't an individual phenomenon, and I think it's really unethical for us to try to address burnout in our organizations from a place of just self-care. We have to address it from a systemic perspective.
Make no mistake, this system is traumatic. It in and of itself is creating its own trauma. Each and every person that sits here can start an individual off on their diversion path.
Even though I think and have compassion for people, I think now when you, as they say, walk a mile in their shoes, that I'm going to try to make sure that those people that do have to walk that mile have the resources, the individuals that they can go to help walk them through those programs, and the information that they need to be able to be successful when they come out.
Bereavement is actually the most frequently reported type of trauma in clinic-referred youth. It's also the strongest predictor of poor school outcomes above and beyond any other form of trauma.
There is no research out that indicates that it is helpful for the client to have to stop the use of these medications before they leave your program. But the way that the brain synapses are changed, we cannot change those synapses simply by having them in our court.
They're not being counted. And we are not counting girls. You've erased their childhood. You've erased their experiences. And that's why data is so important in the work that we do.
We developed the County Mental Health Law Plan. It's a checklist. It's a chance to do a self-analysis, get some education, and then work with us in a personalized workshop.
The acuity of the children that they are serving now is unlike the acuity of the children that they were serving even 10 years ago. And what we heard is that there is a need for more crisis services, things like youth crisis outreach teams or mobile crisis outreach teams. We heard that there's a need for more outpatient services.
There is a knowledge practice gap in the system that has blamed families instead of recruiting them as allies. Talking to and listening to families like mine is in everyone's best interests.
The risk principle says you need to direct your resources and your most intensive services to high-risk individuals, and you want to minimize services to lower-risk individuals.
This is the mistake that I see people make the most when they're trying to de-escalate somebody. If I'm in a heightened state of emotion, you've got to get me back down to a state of communication before you can start talking about how we're going to solve the problem.
Thank you, Rose. Always incredible. Thank you so much. We are always looking for ideas for the summit and for the bench book. And as Molly announced, as this legislative session kicks off, we are soon going to convene our adult bench book committee. So if you would like to be on the adult bench book committee or on the summit committee or have suggestions or improvements, please reach out to us as soon as possible, and we'll get that started. It's going to pop up sooner than you know it. And next up is Andy Perkins.
Thanks, Kayma. I'm going to provide a couple updates on committees that I staff. So I'm going to tell you that the data committee will meet at 1 o'clock on February 13th. We plan to build on the success of our best practice data guide and continue to explore ways to use data to improve services and outcomes for everyone that we can. So if you would like to be part of that, let me know. And at the end of February, the Substance Use Disorder Committee will meet on February 25th. That will be at noon Central. And I'm excited to see where the interest and expertise that's volunteered for this group takes us. We're just starting out, and I think I'm very excited about where it's going to go. So if you would like to join either or both of those groups, please send me an email and we will get you added to that invitation. JCMH has also been working on a strong ending to our court liaison pilot program with the National Center for State Courts and exploring our options for future efforts in that area, including tailoring an implementation guide to Texas-specific issues and laws. Work on this project is ongoing, and I think it will lead to great resources for our audience. So I hope to provide you even more exciting updates about that in the future. And now I'm going to turn it over to Michael Garcia.
Thanks, Andy. As we settle into the new year, we're working to ensure that we maintain accurate records and our publications reflect current information throughout our publications. So if this year is a new year, new title for you, please reach out to me or another staff member so we can update your information. This also includes any changes to your contact information. We want to be sure we can get you all of our meeting invitations as needed. As well, JCMH is working to mail out orders for our code books. So if you place an order, know that we're working on it. We currently have several hundred code books left though, so if you need any, please let us know or fill out our online order form. And with that, I'll pass it to Rose McBride.
Thank you, Michael. Hi, everyone. We have released 2 new episodes of the podcast, Reimagining Justice, since we last met. January's episode featured Captain Sarah Bigham and Amberly Conley. They were speaking about jail-based competency restoration in Grayson County. And in December, 2 of our speakers at the summit, Yvonne Mboss and Jennifer Sawinski, who had a breakout session, highlighted the Downtown Austin Community Court. Our February episode is going to come out a week from today, and I talked to Keisha Morris with the Andrews Center, which is the LMHA in Smith, Henderson, Rains, Van Zandt, and Wood counties. She has a very unique position. She is the Chief SIM Officer. So that position came about after the JCMH went to Smith County to do a SIM mapping workshop. The LMHA created this position to ensure the county is following through on the initiatives and priorities that they identified at the SIM mapping. So look out for that next Friday. And all of the full summit videos are up on our YouTube channel and our website. And the video links can be found on the Summit 2024 webpage of our website, along with a form to submit for CLE credit. So if you didn't get to attend all of the sessions, you can go watch the videos and still get that CLE credit. Our video library has also been updated on the website, categorizing the new summit videos by topic, as well as the 2 recap videos that you saw today. Additionally, if you want to take a look at a page in your notebook under tab 5, I'm also going to share my screen and show you. I did a little analysis of our social media from 2024. So a graph showing the growth of all of our channels. We're on Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram. People love our LinkedIn. That's by far our most popular one. And then these are just some examples of some of our higher performing posts from the year. So the leftmost is photos from former Chief Justice Nathan Heck's retirement ceremony in the Supreme Court building. People really liked that one. A lot of comments thanking him for his service and sharing memories that people have had with him. Another one is a Facebook post from the summit. We had quotes from the speakers and photos of them. People liked that. And then on the right is a post from our Fort Bend County Mental Health Law Plan workshop that we did. And a lot of people from Fort Bend shared that, so it got some traffic there. So a lot from events. If you have anything going on that you would like us to share, we always love highlighting what our commissioners and collaborative council members are doing, as well as the awesome things that are going on in your counties. So feel free to email me and let me know if there's something you'd like me to share. I'm always looking for some content. And with that, I will send it back to Justice Bland quickly before we take a quick break.
All right, we're going to take a break and we'll return at it's about 10 after 9. So let's return at 9:25.
Good morning. How are you all? Good.
Okay, we're going to get started back up again. And before we begin, I wanted to recognize Representative Joe Moody on the line. He has been a great supporter of the JCMH and sponsored our bills and helped explain them to his colleagues in the legislature. And obviously someone with his many years of experience in the legislature is a valuable asset to have. So thank you for being with us this morning, and take it away, Justice Heddle.
Thank you, Justice Bland. Welcome back from the break. Welcome, Representative Moody. I have the privilege of introducing our next speaker, Dr. Melissa Etheridge. She is an associate professor at the Dell Medical School, where she teaches, is in the Department of Psychiatry and Behavioral Education. She served as a JCMH commissioner for 3 years, from 2021 to 2024. She unfortunately couldn't join us live in real time, but she has done us a service and prepared a video presentation for us on personality disorders and common misconceptions about personality disorders. Take it away, Rose.
Hello, commissioners and attendees of today's meeting. I'm Dr. Melissa Eshelman. I'm a psychiatrist here in Austin. I was asked to provide a brief presentation on personality disorders. That includes talking about what the different personality disorders are, symptoms, treatment, and prognosis. All right, we'll go ahead and get started with that information. What are personality disorders? These are long-term, enduring patterns of behavior and inner experiences that differ significantly from what is expected in individuals in their culture. Personality disorders affect at least 2 of these areas: the way one person thinks about themselves or others, the way they respond emotionally, the way of relating to other people, and then ways of controlling one's own behavior. Now, what is the cause of personality disorders? A person may develop a personality disorder because of inherited genetics, as well as environmental influences. So think about temperament. Temperament is what lays a framework for an individual's personality development. Temperament is an inherited and innate characteristic that really contributes to someone's development of personality. So for example, just think of young children. You're going to see some who are very outgoing and some that are shy and reserved. And that's part of their personality development. Temperament is also shaped through environmental factors. This includes different life experiences, such as trauma, which can include abuse or bullying. Relationships and outcomes of relationships, especially those that are fractured or really diminish their feelings of trust. And then socioeconomic conditions, such as poverty. And we typically don't diagnose anyone under the age of 18 with a personality disorder because their personalities are still developing. Now, prevalence, so how frequently are we seeing this in the population? I'm going to show you 2 studies. This first one is the National Comorbidity Study replication, which looked at data from 2001 to 2003. And they showed that for US adults ages 18 and older, there was a prevalence of 9.1%. And then for borderline personality disorder, 1.4%. So we have a study showing 9.1%, but then another study around the same time frame, 2001, 2002. This was an NIH study that showed it was closer to 15%, so 14.8%. This particular study didn't look at borderline personality disorder, but did show a higher prevalence for obsessive compulsive personality disorder. So in our DSM, there are 10 personality disorders, and they're categorized into 3 broad clusters: Cluster A, Cluster B, and Cluster C. And I'm going to give you some more information about each of those personality disorders. So in Cluster A, the way we remember it is that these are behaviors that seem unusual, weird, odd, eccentric. There is a genetic association with schizophrenia, not that these individuals will become schizophrenic, but they may have a family history of schizophrenia. So the three personality disorders under cluster A is paranoid personality disorder, schizoid personality disorder, and schizotypal personality disorder. So just briefly, paranoid personality disorder is as it sounds, an excessive distrust and suspiciousness. And these individuals may think others are lying to them or manipulating them, even when there's really no evidence this is happening. The second is schizoid personality disorder. And these are the really odd individuals who are voluntarily withdrawing from social interactions, and they're actually not worried about it. They're actually content being on their own. They're actually more uncomfortable when they have to relate with others. Other individuals may see these persons as aloof, detached, cold, or loner. And then schizotypal personality disorder. These are eccentric, odd beliefs, magical thinking, and they may have very few close relationships outside of just their own family members. So that's cluster A. Cluster B, this is probably the more familiar of the personality disorders. And I'm going to name out antisocial and borderline personality disorder. So these are behaviors that are impulsive, emotional, dramatic, or erratic. There is a genetic association with mood disorders and substance abuse. These individuals may have that, or they have a family history of other individuals in their family having these disorders. Antisocial personality disorder. These, the behaviors are that this individual acts without a regard to right or wrong, or without even thinking about consequences of their actions and how it might affect other people. Borderline personality disorder. These are individuals who have extreme trouble controlling their emotions. They tend to be quite impulsive. They have very unstable relationship with others. There may be this extreme fear of abandonment, and they may engage in self-injury and have suicidal ideation. Histrionic personality disorder. These are individuals with excessive emotionality and are attention seeking. They really feel a need for others to notice them and reassure them that they're actually significant. And then narcissistic personality disorder is that these individuals feel a sense of importance and power, a need for admiration, a sense of entitlement, but there can also be some feelings of low self-esteem underneath all that bravado. So that's cluster B. Cluster C personality disorders, some symptoms. These are behaviors associated with worry, anxiety, and fear. And there is a genetic association with anxiety disorders. So the three under cluster C are avoidant personality disorder, dependent personality disorder, and obsessive compulsive personality disorder. In avoidant personality disorder, these are individuals that avoid social interactions and close interpersonal relations. They're hypersensitive to rejections. There's lots of feelings of inadequacy. And unlike schizoid, who are loners, these may avoid, but they really long and desire to have relationships. Dependent personality disorder. These individuals lack confidence in themselves and their abilities. They tend to be very submissive and clingy and have an excessive need to be taken care of. An obsessive compulsive personality disorder. These individuals have an excessive concern with perfectionism and hard work. And that's really to the detriment of close personal relationships. There's an over preoccupation with order, perfectionism, and much control. Now, comorbidity speaks to coexisting mental health issues. And just showing you some data from the National Comorbidity Study, and again, this is from 2001 to 2003, a large proportion of people who have personality disorders also have one or sometimes even more mental health disorders. And then this also shows borderline personality disorder, and they also have high comorbidity with anxiety, mood disorders, impulse disorders, and substance use disorders. What are the reasons these individuals might seek out treatment? Oftentimes, it's really at the request of someone else in their life, a relative or a friend, because their maladaptive behaviors are creating stress in their relationship. And actually, the individual with a personality disorder may not really be experiencing any internal distress. However, they might seek out treatment because of those comorbid conditions. depression, anxiety, sometimes their impulsivity, sometimes your substance use. And then they might seek out treatment because they're seeing impairments as a result of their personality disorder, which can include difficulties in their relationships, not doing well academically, not doing well in the job. Treatment. What treatment is available for personality disorders? Some commonly used types of psychotherapy include dialectical behavior therapy, and that really is skills-based therapy to help replace some of the maladaptive behaviors. Cognitive behavioral therapy, which looks at how your different thoughts affect your behaviors, and so how do you change some of that thinking? Group therapy, learning from others who have the disorder, and particularly those who have overcome some of the difficulties associated with their disorder. And psychoeducation, which teaches both the individual with the personality disorder and their family members about the diagnosis, treatment, and ways to cope. With respect to medications, there are no medications specifically used to treat personality disorders. However, in some cases, they, things like antidepressants, anti-anxiety medications, and mood stabilizing medication may be very helpful in treating some of the comorbid depression, anxiety, and impulsivity. This I found interesting. It's from, again, the National Comorbidity Study. Only, just over a third of respondents received treatment. And for borderline personality disorder, only 42% received treatment sometime in the past year. So these are disorders that can be helped with treatment that are getting undertreated. Prognosis. I'm going to just speak to the two that you can see potentially see more of within the judicial system. Borderline personality disorder actually has a fair prognosis. Studies show this improves more than expected. Psychosocial functioning can remain impaired to some degree, and there's been different meta-analysis with 5 and up to 15-year follow-up periods, which showed remission rates of 60%. Antisocial personality disorder. Typically, it persists. However, some patients can achieve remission. The mean age of getting remission is 35, so tends to be younger than someone in their 50s and 60s. Remission is predicted by less baseline symptoms. And again, that speaks to addressing it earlier, older age of presentation, improved community ties, if they're married, if they have a job stability, those all lead to better improved outcomes. So the focus of treatment, you really want to address the comorbid symptoms. You want to reduce the interpersonal conflict, stabilize their functioning, and establishing treatment early. Think of those who may not have a well-entrenched personality disorder and they're still young. That's where you really want to make sure you're addressing it. So here are the takeaways I offer to you today. Personality disorders are long-term, enduring patterns of behavior and inner experiences. So you don't quickly make the diagnosis. It's got to be present and not changing. Number 2, a person can develop a personality disorder because of inherited genetics. And I think what's really important is those environmental influences. You can take that same individual and not expose them to the same dire environmental influences, and they may not develop that personality disorder. A large proportion of individuals with personality disorders have one or more other mental disorders like depression, anxiety, substance use. They may also have a sequelae of trauma. And then personality disorders are treatable, especially when treated early in the course, and very much worthy of treatment and resources. I include some references that is available. And then I also want to thank you for allowing me this opportunity. Here is my contact information. Happy to provide any answers to any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Rose, for screening that, and thanks to Dr. Eshelman for the really thorough but brief, jargon-free, and easily understandable for those of us and less familiar with all of the acronyms and whatnot. Really, really good to sort of go back to basics with that presentation. So thanks for that, Dr. Eshelman. We have another speaker that I'm privileged to introduce. It's Dr. Evanthi Collins, who is the Vice President of the IDD Services Division of the Harris Center in Houston. Dr. Collins holds a Doctor of Education from Texas Southern University, and she was recently honored as the Disability Advocate of the Year by the Mayor's Office here in Houston for people with disabilities. Dr. Collins is here to teach us about how LIDDAs, or for those of us who don't know the acronym, Local Intellectual and Developmental Disability Authorities, LIDDAs, identify children with IDDs. Dr. Collins, you have the floor.
Thank you. I will share my screen. Is everyone able to hear me okay?
Yes, and I can see your first slide.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Okay. So I'll be talking, I know the request was to sort of focus on how youth are identified through the school system. So I'll talk a little bit about that and talk about how they engage with local community centers and how we get involved with that process, and also do a little bit of differentiation between the two, because there's some overlap, but then there's some ways in which we are also quite different in what we do on a day-to-day basis. So the main piece for this particular slide here, obviously, who is governing whom, not obviously, we're all under different sections of the Texas Administrative Code. So clearly, there are some differences there. There are a few differences between what the local community centers do and the school systems do in terms of diagnostic eligibility. Schools tend to cover a wider span and breadth of disabilities, as opposed to what you would have in local IDD authorities, who tend to solely focus on intellectual disabilities and autism services, autism spectrum disorders. But then there's also a lot of confusion out in the communities and with families, and sometimes with service providers, as it relates to how do we engage with some of the state governmental benefits. And then, of course, there are different rules and sets for some of our community-based providers and services at the local level as well. That I sort of want to point out on this slide as well, in addition to the variance as how families engage with these different systems, there's also quite a bit difference in terms of funding that happens between some of these different agencies as well. So as we're talking, we'll talk a little bit about some of the inequity that really ends up impacting what you guys do on a day-to-day basis when we look at, for example, funding on the behavioral health side, our mental health types of services, and that IDD side. It ends up making a difference. I'll speak, specifically looking at Harris County, our IDD funding is less than 1% of what our mental health funding receives. And where that ends up playing out and impacting what you do on a day-to-day basis is that means that as you are encountering this population, there will be less community-based services, there's less capacity, there's less diversions or jail diversions that can be done at the community-based level because of some of those restrictions, and it ends up making a big difference between the populations. How these individuals end up engaging into the school system are being identified in the school system. There are mainly two particular routes, this being the first one, our early childhood intervention. And this is usually before an individual receives an official diagnosis. At the age of 0 to 3, with the exception of a few genetic disorders that we are aware of, such as like Down syndrome, some of our trisomy disorders, generally, by and large, from 0 to 3, they don't have a technical diagnosis yet. But at this point, families may notice some delays in speech, delays in walking, hearing, etc. And so these delays are addressed through early childhood intervention. And they work with therapists, etc., to try to build up that skill set so that the child can transition either into mainstream school or through Head Start. But generally speaking, once they enter into early childhood intervention, that flag, if you will, is going to be raised to the school district once that child integrates into the school. And so at that point in time, the family has the decision on whether they want to pursue special education classes. If they believe there's still a significant enough delay present for the child, they may request some of those special education classes, and their sort of kick starts the evaluation through TEA's process as to how they engage with being diagnosed and with receiving supports and services. So the other place that the child may also be transitioned to is a place like the Harris Center, which, as you said, is you'll hear the acronym LIDA, our local IDD authority. So we're under contract with Health and Human Services Commission. You'll also hear LMHA, which is our sister part of the division, which services our mental health, our behavioral health type services. So those are sort of the initial pipeline for what the school may see. And then this is the pathway that a parent or family may go through once their loved one or their child is in school. A request is generally made to ask for an evaluation. Again, the family, and this request can come from a multitude of locations. So it may be coming from the parent, the physician, the educator themselves may notice some delays that they have with the child in the classroom. And this sort of lays out the route. Once that request is made, the school system usually has about 45 days for an evaluation to be completed. And so they do what's called an FIE, which is a full individual initial evaluation. This is a comprehensive evaluation for the child based upon what the family feels are certain types of delays. By law, the initial evaluation must be full and it must be individual. And so after that, they have 30 days from the time that that's completed to gather the ART team. And that ART team is responsible for developing an individualized education plan. So this is going to, once the evaluation determines what the classification of diagnosis is for the child, where that delay is, the ART and the IEP will then develop what types of supports and services are we going to build up for this child in the school system to ensure that they're getting an equitable and fair education that's on par with their peers. For TEA, it is a requirement that every 3 years that evaluation must be completed again to ensure that if there are any modifications that need to be made to that child's course of action. This slide here sort of shows you the breadth. Like I said, TEA covers a great deal more of disabilities than what you're going to find being covered at some of your local community centers. Everything from health impairments to speech, obviously the intellectual and autism, traumatic brain, visual, emotional, speech language, deaf and hard of hearing. So in comparison, the LIDAs, and as you see here, local IDD authorities, it has a similar pathway, but again, our scope of coverage is a lot narrower. Okay, so we're going to be looking, and we look for diagnostic eligibility to include intellectual disability and or autism spectrum disorders. And that's what we would handle at an organization like the Harris Center. There are 39 of us across the state of Texas, covering all 254 counties. But so what we cover as LIDAs will be the same pretty much across every single one of us. But a request is also made, comes from sort of, again, varied sources, although the parent, of course, has to sign consents for that. Evaluation, our evaluation is called a determination of intellectual disability, or a DID, which is required by HHSC and our TAC. And then we develop a person-directed plan, much like how they develop an ART and IEP. we do something, a discovery process. What are the wants, needs, and outcomes for this family? And how do we build up services comprehensively to support them living independently and in the community and at their best life? Reevaluation is not necessarily a hard and fast requirement at the LITA level, with the exception of if someone is going to be enrolling into a Medicaid waiver. These are the waivers that you're accustomed to hearing about, such as home and community-based services, HCS, Texas Home Living Waiver, Star Plus, etc. If they're enrolling into a Medicaid waiver, generally we try to ensure that that DID is within a 5-year span. Just a slide in here for reference in the event someone wanted to review this information from a diagnostic perspective. What we look for on a little basis, intellectual, again, what qualifies as intellectual disability in accordance with our TAC, and what qualifies as autism spectrum. The 3 main categories, obviously, are intellectual functioning. That's going to be our IQ testing. And we're looking for that to be 2 standard deviations below the mean, which is going to be 70 and below on an IQ scale, and then adaptive functioning, which falls below what would be expected for other peers of their age and functioning. And then, of course, from a developmental stage perspective, both of these disorders are considered developmental disorders, so they need to happen prior to the age of majority. So for ID, that's going to be prior to 18. And then for autism, obviously, we're looking at deficits in social skills, repetitive types of behavior, hand clapping, swaying, stacking, echolalia, those types of things. And again, from the tax perspective, this needs to occur before the 22nd birthday for autism. A few questions and misnomers I just wanted to sort of review. We get a lot of families out in the community who are not quite sure how to navigate school versus a place like the Harris Center or LITAs, or even other community-based type supports for persons with IDD. One being, my child was already evaluated at school, and I'm looking to receive services at the Harris Center. I don't need to complete you guys' DID, right? Well, that's incorrect, because again, who is governing whom sort of dictates what pathway and what forms and what processes a family may need to complete. And that variation, unfortunately for us, means that we still have to complete a DID. Now, what we do at the Harris Center and best practices that's allowed by the state says that we can take a school full evaluation. Our psychologists can review it, and if in agreement, they can endorse it, meaning that they don't have to make the family go through a 3 or 4 hour reevaluation process, but they can endorse what the school has done. But they do need to complete the DID process with us to get that endorsement. Second question, I'm only seeking government benefits, and we get this a lot. I don't necessarily want services, but I'm trying to sign up for SSI. I'm trying to sign up my loved one for Medicaid. So I'm coming to you guys to get a DID. And that is just a complete misnomer. It's not a requirement for governmental benefits. The DID is relevant if you're trying to access HHSCs or state general revenue dollars. It's a requirement of HHSC and the TAC, but it is not a requirement for these governmental benefits. And so we certainly don't want people waiting inappropriately to receive a DID, because there is some time of wait when they could have availed themselves to other pertinent, critical community-based services that they really are in need of, because they're waiting on an evaluation that just wasn't necessary. I want special education services from my school-aged child. Can I receive a DID to get school-based services? So it's sort of the reverse. I want to come to the Harris Center, get a DID, and use that for TEA purposes to be able to start special education services. Possibly. While the school, I believe, will accept our DID, they do a similar process to what we do for their evaluation, endorse it, but we will only complete a DID for someone who is seeking GR services. It's a capacity and resource limitation issue. And so that we don't want to duplicate what the other agency is doing. So unless someone is seeking actual services for general revenue, we will allow TEA to complete their process. And they do employ school psychologists who do the same thing that we do. Can I find out if my client has received a DID and what services they're getting at the Harris Center? We work a lot with our law enforcement partners. We work with the attorneys. We work with district attorneys and other people who are involved in the criminal justice system, and they question this a lot. I'm working with the client. How do I find out if they are an IDD, they have an IDD diagnosis, and if they do, what kind of services are they receiving, and what kind of services may be available to them in the community to help support them upon discharge. And so we have created a pathway for that information to be shared with entities, and the email address is there, and we are able to provide complete and full information to the requesting party. This here are justice involved individuals. So when we took a look at some of the studies over a 14-year span from 2011 to 2024, we were able to determine that those with a confirmed IDD diagnosis in our Harris County jails, we had a total of about 526 bookings for roughly around 350 individuals. But when we take a look at historical information of the number of youth in a jail system, and we look at data from the mid-70s to about the mid-90s, 10% is the customary percentage that we know to be true for IDD individuals when you compare them to the larger population in a jail of youth that are there. So we know at around 350, which is less than 5%, it's not the full picture. It's not the total picture. And what we believe is happening is that we're not really identifying them or doing a good job of capturing and identifying individuals who may fall diagnostically in this category. So I'd love to tell you that over, from the 90s to the 2020s, that we've done such a great job community-wise that these individuals are not showing up in jail. And we know that that is not the case, especially when we look at the growth of the population and the distribution of IDD funding across the state of Texas to community centers like the one that I'm with. So there's a significant growth of well over 62% just in Harris County alone, but a reduction in funding by 50%. So the real cause is that we need to do a much better job of screening for these individuals so that we can identify them, get a better control over the true numbers of individuals who are in the jail system so that we can do a better job of trying to request for appropriate resources and capacity at a community-based level so that the jail doesn't become a residential option, if you will, because that's sort of what's happening by default for these individuals. So we created a layman's tool. This by no means is a diagnostic tool that we're asking individuals like probation officers or anyone who might be working with someone on a caseload to provide an official diagnosis, but it's a short one-pager that it goes through a series of questions where the person can tell, this person might have IDD or they might be on the autism spectrum. From there, we've built a pipeline where they feed that information to us, to our psychologists, and we will complete the full-fledged DID to determine if IDD is going on or ASD is going on, and then talk about service provision for that person from there. So again, more information here. I try to be conscious of time, but I'm certainly willing and open to answer any questions that you guys may have.
Questions for Dr. Collins?
I have a question. It's Sonia. Can you all hear me? Thank you so much for this presentation and saying what you said about jail being the residential option, because that is the true crisis. This is a conversation, and I don't know if Representative Moody is still on here, and if he is, I hope he's listening. But anybody going to the ledge, we do have this crisis where we're seeing the adults showing up, and I know we've had this conversation in this space, but they don't have the school records, and so we're in this limbo. So have you all had a conversation at the Harris Center about, I mean, we've had conversations about it being not an opt-in, but an opt-out, so that once you are with your school records identified that there is some repository somewhere. I don't know if that lives at HHSC, but I think that is because I think that every attorney and judge on here has had this issue where it's clear the person has an intellectual or developmental disability. It would be great to have those records to already fast track someone to a, you know, more suitable diversion, and we can't do anything because we're just hands tied. Is that a conversation you all have had? And if anybody has thoughts on that?
I'll pause to see if anyone else wanted to add first.
I do, Judge Cindy Wheelis. I'm thankful for your presentation, and I appreciate the identification problem. And I'm wondering if you have any short and long-term recommendations for how do I identify kids coming into the system that have not previously been identified by their school or other DID.
So I'll address both questions. So in terms of the records and the repository, and Sonia, what you said is 100% correct. And unfortunately, because there is still such a great deal of stigma around, I think I heard somebody mention that earlier on the call, but stigma is still so prevalent that many times even we don't get people coming to our doors until there's a family crisis and the individual may be 30, 40, 50 at this point. And so being able to access some of those school records becomes an issue. Now, what we've built in sort of an aid for family through the Harris Center to try to address that, meaning that if the family signs off on a consent form, we will do the legwork and try to reach out to whomever and wherever we can. We're contacting school districts, and sometimes that's still a barrier, right? I mean, especially if they came from outside of Texas or that school no longer exists, unfortunately. We still try to mitigate those barriers by trying to aid the family as much as we can. Even if we can get access to old doctor's records that indicate this child or this adult as a child had some type of delays, we will use that information as well. So even if we can't get what's the most desirable types of records, we will try to turn over every single stone that we can in order to be able to evidence and get that diagnosis for the individual. Because without it, I mean, clearly they have very close to no resources available to them without having the proper diagnosis. And as it relates to Judge Cindy,
the tools that a judge might use to reach out and get information about trying to identify, say they filled out the one pager and they think they have somebody in front of them with IDD. What would be the recommended next step? Yeah.
So what happens with that tool, and that's what the tool was designed to do, to put into the hands of a lay person. All we want them to do is to raise a flag. And through that tool, they're able to raise the flag. That tool then comes to us, and we have our psychologists take the ball and run from there. And they will do the full-fledged diagnosis. They will, again, work with the family if we need to try to access records, so forth and so on. But we will take it from there in terms of being able to provide the official diagnosis for the person, and then work with the courts to provide that information to the courts and anybody else that's involved in that person's case.
I see several hands raised, and if you are one of the people, just shout out your question, and we'll take them in that kind of an order.
Okay, is there a mechanism to test adults for IDD? We have several mental health court participants that we think that's a problem with them complying with their court plans.
Yes, so it's the same exact process. Whether a person comes to us at age 10 or they come to us at age 50, they're going to go through that same DID process. And the only difference is if they come to us as an adult, that's where we're going back and we're trying to search for records during their developmental stage prior to 18 to be able to evidence that these delays were present during that time.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
And that actually leads very well into my question. Having done juvenile representation for a long time, I totally understand the lack of resources you have to assess everyone possible. However, because kids are in that developmental stage, have you considered setting up some type of protocol where once the schools make their diagnosis, that you then bring that over, review it, accept it, and then keep it on file? Because of how often those records just are totally lost. As you said, y'all try to do the legwork to find them, but frequently it's just an impossibility once someone's more than 5 years out of school.
And so when you say bring the records, are you talking about more of an automated process? Or are you talking about more of a, once the family raises their hand, they want to seek community-based services?
Well, in an ideal world, anytime somebody's come over to you, let's say that's one that turns out they're not seeking state services, so it doesn't meet your priority right now, given your capacity, but you find out they're going to the school. Would you then set up a process to get those school records? Or if you refer somebody over to the school, to be sure that once that really those just vital records, because we know for someone once they become an adult, that DID is their golden ticket to services, to meet their needs for the rest of their lives, to be sure that we capture that data that all too often is lost and doesn't exist anywhere, while at the same time you're dealing with your resource limitations.
We had not considered, that is an excellent suggestion. We hadn't considered, because what you're describing to me, I sort of think about that as more of an automated kind of function, where when the school completes an FIE, that information somehow communicated to the local IDD authority in that catchment area. I don't think we've ever discussed that, but that really is a phenomenal suggestion. So I'm making note of that. Now, if a family gets a school diagnosis and they then come knocking on our doors, absolutely. We do request for all school record copies of all school records. That becomes part of that person's health record. And so we maintain a complete, comprehensive, what the school has done and what we have done. And generally speaking, like I was saying earlier, we don't redo the DID. We'll take that FIE, endorse it, and then just go from there. But I really like that idea that you just expressed. So I'm making note of that. Thank you.
Dr. Collins, I have a two-part question. One is, are you familiar with the screening form that is used in the jails right now? And how well do you think that's working in identifying people with IDD that come into the county jails? And two, the jail commission, as you know, runs an IDD advisory committee, and I'm sure Brandon is somewhere on this. They have a screening subcommittee to develop a screening form. So I was wondering if you've ever been in touch with the subcommittee to develop that screening form, or do you have any thoughts on how that screening form could be made better, if it's actually working well right now? So just curious to hear your thoughts on that.
So the Harris Center has staff. We do have a group of our forensic department has staff at our jails, and they do an initial comprehensive screening. This is actually reviewing what they were doing is what led us to go down the path of creating the specific IDD screener. We realized it likely was not touching upon some of the symptomatology that presents itself for individuals presenting in the jail. And so we tried to do a better job of coming up with this screener so that we could capture those individuals that we felt that were being missed. As it relates to the committee, I don't believe I'm familiar with that committee, and Wayne is on the call, and Wayne, you might have to correct me on that if he's.
First of all, I would never correct Dr. Collins. I think you can all tell she's got far more expertise and knowledge than I do. But no, we have not been connected with that.
Thank you.
Hi. Hi. That was an excellent presentation. This is Connie Almeida. So for many years, I actually worked with IDD populations, and so can really resonate with a lot of what we're seeing. And I'm seeing them, my staff is seeing them, our judges are seeing them in our jails. I just wanted to add one issue that, of course, it presents an even further challenge is that then the issues around competency. So we're getting an increase in referrals for competency evaluations for people that have IDD. So clearly we're doing a lot of education, training, consultation with our judges and courts and attorneys. And really, IDD does not equate to not being competent to stand trial. But, again, this just the lack of services in the community, the lack of funding in the community for people with IDD, I mean, clearly has resulted in an increase in incarceration for these individuals and, an increased burden on, detention facilities, on forensic divisions, and on courts. Because many of these individuals should not be in our jails. And just another, and it's really unfortunate, many of these individuals are actually being in our jails because of behaviors that are occurring in the group home settings that are supposed to be taking care of these individuals. So it's unfortunate. Thank you for the presentation.
Can agree with you more, Connie. And I know that we sat on the IDD Summit at Texana talking about this exact same issue. And you're 100% right. When you look at the data, the most prevalent reason our individuals end up engaging in law enforcement is trespassing. So, and you're 100% right. When you look at the salary structure that happened from the last legislative session around the pay for community-based type providers, you couple that with extensive wait lists, like in order to get an HCS slot, we're talking about waiting 16 to 17 years. Like, I mean, it sounds preposterous, but I mean, who on this call would wait 16 years to receive some type of service? But it starts to snowball, and then jail becomes the only option for many of these individuals, unfortunately. So the jail is becoming, you think about some 25 years ago, where we were saying to our societies that jails are becoming the main treatment facilities for persons with mental illness. Jails are now becoming the main treatment facilities for persons with IDD. So. Yes, Judge Larry Phillips.
Thank you, Dr. Collins. Just a quick question related to a question earlier. Am I understanding you to say, is it possible to find an adult that has not had an IDD diagnosis to have that applied after 18? I always thought you couldn't. And if you can they get services, qualify for services at that? It's just something I never knew. And so I want to broadcast it around here if that's possible so that we are more cognizant of that. I just don't know the law.
Yes, sir. Actually, we do that every single day. So the main criteria around the whole 18 or during the developmental stage is that we have to be able to evidence that that person had delays during that time. So a person could easily come to me at 50, but if I'm able to pull, let's say, school records, ideally, or if I'm able to pull doctor's notes, records, those kinds of things that said, yes, these things were present. This person was in special education all through high school, so forth and so on. The psychologist is able to evidence that the delay happened during the developmental stage. And so, yes, a diagnosis can be rendered. And yes, that person can receive IDD related supports and services. Yes, sir.
Thank you. And then just one related area of this, we're starting to see in our jails are those that have dementia. So they're not IDD, they have dementia. And none of us know what to do because they're clearly not competent and they're not going to restore competency. And so I think we're going to see more of that. And I don't know if y'all track that or if that's part of this program that y'all do. Just any comments would be appreciated.
while we don't necessarily, it's not one of the diagnoses that we have as an eligibility criteria to receive services through the Harris Center. Clearly, any population, despite developmental disabilities, could potentially fall prey to dementia, right? So we have individuals with IDD who through the aging process end up in this particular category. And so that's a whole nother dynamic. How are you addressing a comorbidity, IDD and now dementia, or IDD and mental illness? We hadn't even touched upon that, but that's a whole nother type of issue where, you know, how are individuals engaging in private psychiatric hospital beds when for many private psychiatric hospitals, it's an exclusionary criteria, IDD, so they are not even admitted. So again, the main route is to filter these individuals to the jail because they are accepting of these individuals. But no, so to your point, specifically, dementia is not a diagnosis that we track or cover, but it is something that impacts the population that we do serve.
Thank you. So, oh, sorry, did we have one more question?
Well, I just want to say, I did put something in the chat, you all,
yes, we saw
comments, but Judge Phillips, you are saying what we need to do. Everybody does need to start tracking that because we are not at the legislature. We are not making the recommendations that we need to be making. HHSC is not making the recommendations to address these individuals that need other residential options. And so we need to overwhelm the system with the data of who is in the jails and what do we need. But I'm glad you highlighted that. Thank you. And Dr. Collins, I'm just very excited. I will be following up with you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
All right. And as you can see, Dr. Collins, you had a really attentive group who was very interested in your presentation and in this topic in particular. Thank you so much for preparing it and presenting it. We learned a lot, and mostly what comes to mind is just how difficult it is for parents and family members of someone experiencing IDD to navigate the labyrinth of systems that are out there, and a group like yours that helps them is really invaluable. And I think giving some information to judges about it is really helpful. So thank you so much. This is a good segue into comments and updates from our partner organizations. And we're going to start with law enforcement. And we have our two chiefs, Chief Stan Stanridge and Chief Mike Lee. There's already been a little bit of discussion in the chat, so we look forward to hearing an update from you gentlemen. You have the floor.
Chief Stanridge, I know you were pressed for time, so if you're still on, go ahead.
Why don't you go ahead, Chief Lee? Yeah.
Okay. I guess Chief Stanridge had to go to City Council for his hearing. I did see his comments, and I can't agree more that week. I was up in Austin Monday through Wednesday, and we are seeing just a slew of bills around law enforcement and mental health, with a lot of them wanting to place additional burdens on law enforcement. So I can tell you law enforcement is pushing back hard against those. On the expansion bill of expanding emergency detention to paramedics, law enforcement does support that. We would even go further and support further expansion to mental health professionals, as I know this group has talked about in the past. News here in Harris County, for me personally, just wanted to let the group know that after 35 years with the badge, I decided to go ahead and retire the badge and uniform. And that was with 27 years with the Houston Police Department and 8 with Harris County. I'm still with the Sheriff's Office in a different role. I'm the director of the strategic projects for the Sheriff and also his legislative liaison. Just want to thank real quickly, Professor Shannon, Judge Boyce, and for all the work they're doing on tracking the items in the legislature, and especially with the ones that are having potential impact on law enforcement for us. And then just real quickly, I mean, like I said, there's a slew of bills, but one that just got filed this week that, for the folks on here that have a good relationship in their counties with their county sheriff, they may want to bring it to their attention. House Bill 2103. It was filed by Representative Ashby out of Bluffton, and it's pretty simple. All it does is add mental health leave for their jailers following a critical incident. The last session, the legislature passed a bill that provided mental health leave for peace officers and telecommunicators slash dispatchers for mental health leave after a critical incident, but they just kind of forgot to include jailers. So this is kind of going back and correcting that. So if you want to share that with your sheriffs in your county, it's House Bill 2103, and that's all I have.
Thank you, Chief Lee, and congratulations on what sounds to be semi-retirement, not really retirement. It's what is the Arthur Brooks book, From Strength to Strength. It sounds like you're just tapping into the next chapter with your many strengths. So thank you for that report. Okay, next we're going to hear from HHSC, and we have Trina Ida and Scott Shacklin, who are going to give us updates.
Good afternoon. Oh, I guess it's still morning. I was going to say afternoon. It's good to see everyone. I'm Trina Ita. I'm the Deputy Executive Commissioner for Behavioral Health with the Health and Human Services Commission. I'll be brief because I do believe that Scott does have a presentation of some information he wants to review with you all. I just wanted to talk briefly about, which I'm sure many of you are aware of, the work that the agency has done around the Children's Mental Health Strategic Plan work, which has been a culmination of activities that had gone on for over a year. And really working with named participants to compose the subcommittee. And then very intentionally on Dr. Harvey's behalf, Dr. Harvey, who you all well know, who I believe sits on this body as a commissioner, led that work for the agency in convening, those stakeholders to really talk about how we need to build a continuum of care for youth and families that really address the gaps that we see in the system. As y'all will know, there's been lots of investments by the legislature in behavioral health over many years, but there's just been this need to really have a more focused conversation around the needs of children, based on phenomena that I think we all have seen on a national level in terms of what's happening with kids, and then our own challenges here in Texas, where you have issues with parents relinquishing custody, because they're very concerned about having access to appropriate behavioral health services for their children who may have very high needs. So that work concluded, that report is posted. And for those of you who've been watching, there's been a lot of interim activity, in terms of hearings, some of which I've attended and testified with, my colleagues and partners at TJJD and also at the Department of Family and Protective Services. And just to give y'all a little bit more context, I think most folks on here know this, but I took some time. I was at HHSC as Associate Commissioner, and HHSC very graciously allowed me to volunteer and go over and spend time at DFPS, doing some very targeted and strategic work around behavioral health for kids that are in conservatorship. And two, my time there, I really felt like we needed to focus also on what do we do as a system to prevent families from relinquishing care into the system. And so I have since obviously transitioned back to HHSC, but we still work very closely with DFPS, and I would offer JJD in terms of identifying what we think are needs for those kids who we think are at higher risk of coming into the system, and what needs we need to bolster for those kids who are interfacing with the system. And that's really been what our interim work has been, as a group coming together and then talking to legislators, and other policymakers around what we think that is. And some of that has culminated into some things that folks probably saw in our LER. We had a placeholder for the Children's Mental Health Strategic Plan. I think the legislature will use that plan to make some decisions around ultimately other things they want to fund. But to start, there seems to be some agreement around the need to expand youth crisis outreach teams. Last legislative session, there was a glut that was funded. And it seems there's some interest to expand that further. And so it'll be very interesting to see what else culminates over these next few months as we conclude in June, where we land with efforts around children's needs and just needs for the system kind of writ large. And so with that, I will conclude. I don't know, Dr. Harvey, I know she's on, if there's anything else that you want to give a nod to, because I know we are obviously, since we're in the throes of session, all agencies are actively engaged in, analyzing bills, and all those activities therein. So Dr. Harvey, if there's anything else you want to add about the strategic plan or, any bills that you think are of note, please feel free to do so.
I don't have further comment, Deck. I'll just draw people's attention to the chat. I did post the link to the Children's Behavioral Health Strategic Plan in the chat. And Christy will get the JCMH over some hard copies if you all have people that would prefer hard copies. But I think you covered it all, Deck.
So with that, I'll conclude. Thank you all.
All right, do we have Scott on? You're up next, Scott. Well, I know he expected to be here because he has sent in slides. So he may have just, oh, got it. Okay, you ready? Oh, he reports that something's going on with his microphone. So give it a test and we'll go ahead to the next report and then catch back up with you after that. And next we have Dr. Martinez from the Hogg Foundation.
Yeah, good morning, everyone, and thank you. Audio okay? Okay. I just have a couple of things I want to share with everyone, all having to do with the 89th Texas Legislature. The Hogg Foundation very much is involved with that. First, I want to bring everyone's attention. Many of you probably are aware of this, but for those of you that don't, the Hogg Foundation for Mental Health back in 2012 developed a guide to understanding mental health systems and services in Texas. Well, we're now into our 6th edition. The guide is data-driven and evidence-based resource on mental health and substance use systems and services, funding and various policy issues for the whole state of Texas. The first guide, as I said, was printed in 2012, and it's updated every other year to coincide with each Texas legislative session. Its purpose is to help inform mental health and substance use policy analysis, legislative development, and decision making. The intended audience includes obviously our legislators, also the legislative staff, state agency staff, advocates with lived experience, family advocates, mental health and substance use providers, as well as anyone that is policy minded and is a stakeholder and cares about the mental health of all of Texas. The 2024 guide, the 6th edition, is our first, though, that is entirely online. So it's our first online version because we were getting feedback to make it much more user-friendly because it was turning into this big, giant book. If you guys are familiar with the Medicaid pink guide, this one was considered the green guide for mental health. But we wanted to make it accessible, and so it is now online. And in the chat, I will put the link to it for everyone to be able to access it. It covers 13 policy environments. For example, I'm not going to go through all of them, but behavioral health workforce, state hospitals and forensic services, and well-being of youth in the Texas juvenile justice system are examples of policy environments that are contained within the guide. Also, we cover our state agencies, Health and Human Services Commission, Department of Family and Protective Services, the Texas Education Agency, Department of State Health Services, Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board, Texas Department of Criminal Justice, and the Texas Juvenile Justice Department. For each state agency segment in the guide, we have an overview, fast facts, policy concerns, legislative overview, funding, and reference sections for each of those. So please, if you'd like to, please avail yourself of that and just go to our link and it'll be available there. And it can also be utilized on mobile devices. The second thing I'd like to share with you, because it is the legislative session, we have a policy unit that is there at the Capitol, being there as a educational service for anyone that so wishes to help us out. However, we also provide information on and have our policy priorities. I'm only going to give you the 3 buckets because with each one of the buckets, there are many, many, many segments, but this is also available online. And I also put the link there for you to access it. The 3 buckets are prevention, early intervention, and then access to mental health services. With that, I'll turn it over to you, back to you, Justice Bland. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And thank you for being such a supporter of the JCMH. And I think I heard a little bit of mic feedback, so I'm wondering if Scott Chucklin got his mic working. And so
Can you hear me now?
check that. Yes.
Can you hear me now? Okay.
Yes.
I had to switch to my iPad. I don't know what was happening with my new computer, but state computers are like that. I wanted to give just a update on the state hospital side on what we're doing in terms of capacity and our wait list. And so just these are quick numbers. I've emailed this out to everybody, so you'll have a chance to look at it on your own. But as you can see, our maximum security wait list continues to go down. We've been very pleased with that. If you look from July 2023 to December 2024, it's been cut almost in half. On the next slide, we have our non-maximum security wait list. It's kind of balanced out right now. It has come down. I think there's 2 things that's driving that. One is we're moving people from maximum security to non-max, and so that sometimes will push the numbers up. And then we've seen a little bit of an increase in people being referred. But we overall, the wait list is down from December of 2020. I'm trying to think, 2023 to now. I think the overall wait list has come down about 700 or 800. So we are seeing a lot of progress there. If you'll go to the next slide. This is the number of beds that we have online. Now, this is just capturing from January 2024, so you're not seeing a lot of dramatic increases now. We had 1,937 beds online then, and we have 2,041. We still have some beds offline due to staffing and some due to construction and maintenance. But if you look at the next slide, what you'll see is really what our average daily census, how it has been impacted. So if you go back to when we were at our all-time low, which would be about, I think it was January 31st, 2022, our average daily census was 1,420. It is now up over 1,900. And so that's 500 more beds, which doesn't necessarily mean just 500 people, because as we have turnover, they're serving even more people. And that was driven largely by, I think, COVID kind of going down. Our salary increases that we implemented obviously had a huge impact. The second one you'll see, and then the third one, which helped us to get more staff in and get beds online at that time. If you'll go to the next slide. I wanted just to update you on construction projects, because again, capacity is everything. The more capacity we have, that's the more people we can serve, the more we can dive into this wait list. The Texas Behavioral Health Center at UTSW Medical Center, which I would have called the Dallas State Hospital, but they had a much fancier name. You can see that they are getting scheduled to open late this year with the adult unit, and then looking forward into, that says July 2025, but I think it's going to be a little bit, that's the anticipated completion. We're probably looking at opening in December because they'll need to get staffed up and everything, and then the pediatric unit will be opening shortly after. Of those 292 beds, at least 75 will be forensic. We've been in discussions with them. I think we're going to probably bump that number up a little bit, but I don't want to overcommit right now to that. 75 is what was directed by the legislature. We also have the other state hospital, either replacements, Terrell in North Texas, Wichita Falls, but also the new hospitals. The Panhandle one is going to have 75 beds. 50 of those will be forensic. We'll be breaking ground this summer. The Lubbock Psychiatric Center is going to have a 50-bed maximum security facility. Rio Grande, also a 50-bed maximum security center down in Harlingen. And then El Paso expansion is going to be 50 additional beds, 25 of which will be forensic. And finally, San Antonio State Hospital, we're going to add 40 MSU beds there. The various completion dates and anticipated completion dates are on there. We are on track. The legislature was very generous in helping us to get more expansion and capacity here, and hopefully that's going to help meet our needs and see us start to see decreases in the wait list even further. On the next slide, these are some grant projects that were given to us to contract with some local hospitals. You'll see that there are 4 of them. One is going to be a mental health inpatient facility in the Rio Grande Valley, going to have up to 100 beds. At least 50% of those will be forensic. In Montgomery County, they're going to be adding up to 100 beds, at least 50% forensic as well, although they've told us that they plan on being 100% forensic. At least 50% is what was in the Senate Bill 30, but Montgomery County wants to do 100%. And so that again is going to be just more people that we'll be able to serve. We're kind of seeing this as an extension of our hospital beds and our hospital capacity. Victoria County up to 60 beds, at least half will be forensic, and then Beaumont Baptist will have 72 beds, and at least half of those will be forensic. We're in various stages of getting things done with them between design documents, grant agreements, and other things, but we are working as quickly as possible. But if you look at those and you look at the previous slides and that has the number of beds we're adding, you can see that we're really, the legislature's put a huge investment in us being able to get increased capacity, serve more people, work on the wait list, but also civil capacity is being increased as well. On the next slide, this is just high level, just topics that we expect to hear from the legislature. First is to operationalize these new hospitals. We'll obviously need FTEs. Those are reflected in Senate Bill 1 and House Bill 1 that have come out. And then we have our contracted beds, the costs related to those. And then El Paso Construction will be working with the legislature. They partially funded us to get started, to procure land and get started, but we now have to go back to them for the full cost of that expansion. So very, very quick, but I just wanted you to know that the good news is waitlist is down. It's still not where we want it to be, obviously, and we are expanding capacity. So hopefully that will help us to continue to drive this. And also, as the state population goes up, and we just see more people in general coming into Texas, that means there's a greater need. Hopefully, we'll be able to step up and meet that need. So that's all I've got. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Scott. Next, we're going to hear from Yolanda Lewis at the Meadows Mental Health Policy Institute. And Yolanda gave a terrific, with her partner at the Hackett Center, gave a terrific presentation on how communities can better foster juvenile resiliency, especially juveniles in high-risk situations who have experienced grief or trauma. And it was great. I hope you got to see it at the summit. And I've already, I have in mind another organization that I think would really benefit from that presentation. So your reward for giving a great presentation is to get somebody to ask you to do it again. So I may be reaching out to you, Yolanda, but if you'll give us a brief update on what's going on over at Meadows.
Sure. Thank you so much, Justice Bland. We are continuing to do our work around helping the criminal justice system respond well to individuals who may have mental health issues. So we are here to help. I mentioned in our last conversation, our last meeting, that we are hoping to secure funding from a large national entity to help the entire state of Texas address 911 calls and also crisis response more broadly. We are hoping to hear back from the organizations that have been partnering with us in around April of this year. Just to be a little more defined, this is an opportunity for 3 states, Michigan, Texas, and Ohio to really start to invest deeply in crisis response, what that will look like across the board, and working with local communities to build out very innovative systems that can be replicated across the country. So we're really excited to be in the fold for that type of opportunity. In addition, as Justice Bland mentioned, we are working with local communities across Texas and some partners, really thinking about intergenerational trauma and brain health for children, thinking about how we can be instructive, helpful, and supportive of courts and judges as they're interfacing with parents who may have children who are incarcerated, and how do we identify those children and get them access to care. And so we hope to have more information about those strategies in the coming year. Other than that, we are here to help, always happy to work with communities. And just as a point of personal privilege, I just want to say thank you for the opportunity to serve as a commissioner. I deeply respect so many people on the screen, and I look forward to connecting with you over the course of the year. Thank you so much, Justice.
All right, terrific. And next is Dr. Blake Harris with the Texas Veterans Commission.
Good morning, all. Happy to be here and provide a couple of updates. Within our Veterans Mental Health Department, we do have our Justice Involved Veteran Program, which, as many of you know, is responsible for providing the legislature an annual review of the Veteran Treatment Court progress. One of the things that we've also looking to do is to just approve the rec to go to publishing is a JIV bench card that we're looking forward to send out to all of the judges across the state, just so they have some resources in there and right there on hand for some of the mental health support and supportive services that can be provided for justice involved veterans. Also, within our Justice Involved Veteran Program, we've been working with the National Justice Involved Veteran Network that is operated through Department of Justice's National Institute of Corrections. Through that, there was, I believe a year ago, we published a veteran-specific sequential intercept model for those justice involved veterans. And building off that, there was a series of national webinars that was met with good success, and we're going to continue to further those and do some more deep dives into each intercept. That is something where we're working with trying to rustle up quite a few judges to sit down on some panels and do some discussions, as well as hearing from folks who have been through veteran treatment courts across the nation and some other national experts. So excited when that will kick off, hopefully in the next couple months. Also, we are tracking a few legislative bills that are prioritizing veteran mental health. There was one in particular that I wanted to call attention to for all of the other commissioners here, and I will drop that link right here in the chat. It is House Bill 153 from Representative Raymond. The verbiage change that's suggested is small, and certainly as a state agency, TVC, speaking of, is, obviously as any state agency, we're neither for nor against any bill. But speaking as a forensic psychologist, I will call attention that the small language change seems to be a significant shift and deviation from the best practices and standards for what's usually considered a good treatment match for a specialty court participant. So I do encourage folks there to review that one. Certainly, we're on hand to provide input when asked, as any state agency is. But what they're looking to do with the entry policy is to make it automatic admission for veterans into veteran treatment courts without, with the exception of the attorney representing the state to show good cause why they're not a good fit, which is quite a bit of a paradigm shift from the goodness of fit model that most specialty courts work under. Additionally, there are some other bills related to our department working with TCOL to provide potential training on veterans' mental health needs to jailers. That's whether that ends up being a requirement or not. Certainly, we're just on hand to continue to develop the training, which we've already started with our partners at TCOL, just to make that a training that is available. Whether it's required or not is certainly, we'll let other stakeholders weigh in on that. And we do know that there are many training requirements already on law enforcement officers and correctional staff, so we want to be mindful of that. And lastly, I did want to say that there's quite a few great resources and input from all state agencies that have behavioral health footprint within our statewide behavioral health coordinating council progress reports. I'm fortunate enough to be the co-chair and get to ride shotgun with my good friend and colleague, Dr. Courtney Harvey, who does a great job stewarding that as the chair. So I would think that is a great resource when there's folks are looking for kind of state agency perspective and recommendations and some good data about what's being provided across the state. And then lastly, just on a personal note, I thoroughly enjoyed the opportunity to present at the last summit. And I think you guys did an excellent job organizing and pulling off a really cool event. That's all I have, unless there's any questions for us.
Great. And we couldn't do it without people like you, Dr. Harris. So thank you so much. And next, we have the Texas Juvenile Justice Department. And I think we have Dr. Evan Norton on today to present.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon or good morning still. I'm here on behalf of Chandra Carter, our executive director. She's gotten pulled into some session-related stuff. So first, I'll start with my transition. So for the past 4 or 5 years, I've overseen the agency's mental health programming. And on January 1st, I was promoted to a deputy executive director role. So in addition to continuing to oversee the mental health programming, I now have taken on the parole, reentry, probation, research, and medical teams. So excited about the new role and hopefully get to interact with more of you in different spaces as a result. We are obviously in the throes of legislation, as many other people on this call are. We're pretty happy with how the base budget bill in both the House and the Senate has been filed. It does include a number of our big items to include direct care staff salary increases and pretty significant investment in increasing capacity for diversion and early intervention in the community probation or county probation departments. And so those are good wins to start. And then we have a few exceptional items to continue to follow up on. We are working closely with Meadows, so it's nice to see Yolanda on here to look at some mapping work, really looking at resource mapping across the state. Really excited about that project. It's been going really well. Hope to continue to utilize that federal funding to facilitate that. And then lastly, I had maybe a call for folks on this group. We were allocated funding to build out 2 modernized youth rehabilitation spaces for juvenile justice last legislative cycle. And one of those is really going to be for sort of our deep end youth who need some intensive work on their violence and aggression needs. And the other one is specifically for mental and behavioral health. And we have an interest in creating a pathway for county probation departments to utilize this resource without having to adjudicate to the Texas Juvenile Justice Department. So it's sort of a unique pathway that perhaps this group, I couldn't think of a group better than the Judicial Commission on Mental Health to explore. How could young people who are involved in juvenile probation departments, if the other resources are not available to them, maybe due to the significance of their behavioral health needs manifesting in aggression, how could they utilize maybe some resources that we are building out without a formal adjudication. So hopefully a space we can maybe have more conversation as a group in the future. And that'll do it for the Texas Juvenile Justice Department updates. Thank you for the opportunity.
That's terrific. And for those of you juvenile judges online, I encourage you to reach out to Dr. Norton to explore whether that could be part of some sort of deferred adjudication process. Okay, next we've got April Zamora with Takumi.
Hi, good almost afternoon. I'll try and be quick. So some of you may know, some of you may not, but we just completed the sunset process, and now we're looking at what our bill will look like. So we did have an exceptional item for Takumi. It did not make it in the base bill, but overall our funding and base bill looks really well for TDCJ proper. But as far as the sunset report goes, Tacoma did wrap in the Reentry and Integration Division is now a new division of TDCJ, which I'm hopefully will be able to explain well, and you will be pleased about some of those decisions that we've made. But the Rehabilitation and Reentry Division is born and still based off of the Tacoma model. But our rehabilitation programs and reentry programs have all merged really as a continuity of care process for those going through our prison programs. But what we also acquired was our therapeutic communities. So as people transition out of our substance use programs and go into our therapeutic community programs post-release. So for those of you judges that deal in adult services, if they have to go to a safe P while they're on probation or into an institutional prison therapeutic community, and they have to spend 90 days in a treatment facility, those will be monitored by my division. One of the unique things when it comes to mental health is we actually have special needs programs. So if somebody is diagnosed with a mental health disorder or IDD, those programs are also available. So Tacoma is now going to be involved in the screening, whereas it used to be screened traditionally by parole or probation, deciding who would go to those programs. Tacoma is going to be involved in those screenings and really making sure that we do appropriate placements throughout. So that all being said, as fast as I could to be as respectful as with your time in terms of the merge, one of the other things that we'll be doing is we'll be going to our Tacoma Advisory Committee and talking about how that continuity of care path looks. So currently our vendors for those aftercare programs are private contractors. So talking about whether or not we should embed monies with our local mental health authorities so somebody doesn't have to go to substance use treatment with one person and then going to the LMHA for their mental health treatment. So embedding our treatment all in one place for that population. In terms of our legislative front, we are still at exceptional item on the TDCJ budget. We're looking at $12 million worth of requests. Again, going back towards pay raises for our clinicians, our psychiatrists, both in our adult and juvenile programs. We definitely know that we need to look at salaries, make sure that we're paying the appropriate wages within our programs, which would allow us an additional almost 850 treatment slots. Our biennial report did post for Tacoma, so you would be able to look at how we're performing in our programs. But for adult probation, for instance, our recidivism rate is running at 11.5%, but for parolees on within our intensive case management, we're running at 6.5%. So the programs are still performing well, and we'd like to keep those intact and also make sure that we're able to fund those at appropriate levels. The other part of our legislative request, so Evan Norton, I definitely just wrote a lot of what you said down, is we have 3 duly diagnosed residential facilities that are in coordination with our adult probation departments. But those duly diagnosed probation facilities are so we can divert from a safe P. So before somebody's ever adjudicated or has to go into a next level intermediate sanctions process or come into a prison facility, they're treated within their communities, within a local CSCD, but it is on CSCD community transitional treatment type centers. So the LMHA is the provider of care. We don't break that continuity of care. And then the CSCD is providing that substance use service, but it is all within that community. And so they don't leave their community. So we're asking for an additional 180 beds. And finally, I really wanted to update you on one of those things that I think that this is one of the folks that I when we got a Bureau of Justice Assistance grant for a mental health peer specialist program. As you know, I'm a big advocate of peer support. We got that first grant on 9/1 of 24. You go into a planning period, but we now have 15 peer support specialists that are fully launched and doing their great work within our system. They've passed all of their core tests. They've passed all of their programming. They have provided 2,535 hours of services within the system. We are training another 36 this year. They have passed their core and are now out there working. We hired a licensed clinician to work with them to make sure if they're having any struggles or problems, they're doing well. And I just wanted to let you guys know that I appreciate all of your support, because the feedback on these peer mentors has been monumental. And so looking at everything that happened during the last summit, I'm just going to tell you, I saw some of the folks that we work with that came and presented to you about peer mentorship. And I'm just proud of this commission for the work that they keep doing, because it's amazing. So thank you.
Thank you for all the great work that you do, April. And you never take too long. You have so much good information to give us. And I think the presentation from peer mentors and others at the summit are some of the most meaningful ones for all of us who do this work and help us keep our eye on the ball. Okay, we have two presentations left, Brandon Wood and Alex Comsedy. And so if you guys will just follow in succession, we may finish right at the 3-hour mark.
Thank you, Justice Bland. I'm going to be very brief, and I believe that Richard Morgan with my staff is going to be posting a link to the Commission on Jail Standards Advisory Committee that focuses on IDD. I would encourage everyone to take a look at that report. There are 5 work groups within that advisory committee, and they have made recommendations for the legislature to take into consideration. I'm hopeful that the advisory committee, as it moves into this next year and prepares for the next legislative session, will come with some very substantial recommendations and actionable type items, because I think that there's more that needs to be done. And I appreciate the comments that were made previously regarding individuals with IDD, unfortunately find themselves in the criminal justice system. And much like mental health, it often serves as the easy button that people like to hit. And unfortunately, they're a very difficult segment of the inmate population to contend with, and we can do better in that regard. Also, Judge Phillips had mentioned something that we are beginning to track as well, and that is the issue of individuals with dementia that find themselves involved in the criminal justice system. So for the sake of brevity, I'm going to again cut my presentation short and just encourage everyone to take a look at the legislative report for the IDD Advisory Committee that is posted in the chat and on our website. Thank you, ma'am.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Alexander Comsudi. I'm the Grant Administrator at the Court of Criminal Appeals for the Judicial and Court Personnel Training Program, should just call the Grant for short. I'm happy to share that Judge David Newell is now our judicial liaison to the court. The grant supports statewide legal education for judges of all levels, criminal defense attorneys, public defenders, prosecutors, clerks and all court personnel, and constables and law students. In addition to this educational component, we also support travel to most of these seminars. Currently, 6 of the court's grantees train on mental health, and right now we have 1 additional pending application from the Center for American and International Law for mental health funding. Just to share some quick highlights on the trainings that our grantees do at the Justice Court Training Center, the Justice of the Peace will be training on legal procedural topics of mental health detention and rural emergency detention orders. There will also be training on trauma-informed courts. There's going to be civil process seminars for constables focusing on mental health and self-care for law enforcement. And at the Association of Counties, they're incorporating a mental health topic in almost every course in the regional trainings around the state for the constituent judges and clerks. This year, too, they will be continuing a judicial forum special just for judges on mental health. This year, that will focus on best practices, diversion programs, guardianships, alternative to guardianships, and sequential intercepts. At the Criminal Defense Lawyers Association, they recently co-hosted with NAMI in Plano for a mental health training. And as part of the roadshow around the state this year, they'll be educating attorneys to identify mental health issues in their clients, specifically to better help represent indigent defendants. So please feel free to reach out to our office. I'll drop my email in the chat box if you'd like any more information on the trainings that our grantees provide. So thank you for your time today, and we are happy to be part of the mission. Thank you, Justice Bland.
Thank you, Alex. And thank all of you for being here today. And the only announcement I want to add is that our next commission meeting will be in person on April 9th in Austin at the State Bar Building. So you'll get more information about that. But if you haven't noted it, mark your calendar. Thank you to Christy and her team for all the good work that they do to help organize these meetings, but also for all the work they do year round. We will try to keep everybody updated on legislative and other sorts of developments in the interim, but I look forward to seeing you in April. And just on behalf of my colleagues, Rebecca Huddle, Jesse McClure, and Mary Lou Keel, thank you for all the work you're doing. And we look forward to gathering again in April. And we are adjourned.